So, this video begins on page 548 of your textbook with the reading called The Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention, 1848, the Declaration of Sentiments. And the way I kind of wanted to start my discussion on this is to compare some of the language between the Declaration of Sentiments and the Declaration of Independence. So, as you know, the Declaration of Sentiments was composed by the women who attended the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention in 1848, one of the first national conventions for women's rights, or the first national convention in New York. And the Declaration of Independence was composed years earlier by a group of men. And so if you just compare sort of some of the language, like for example, in the Declaration of Independence, the first paragraph begins, "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands, blah 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 blah." And in the Declaration of Sentiments it begins, "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one portion of the family of man to blah 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 blah." And so right away from the very first lines we see that the Declaration of Sentiments and the Declaration of Independence have something in common, and that the women who were writing the Declaration of Sentiments were doing this on purpose. It wasn't that they just came up with this on their own. They were mimicking the language of the Declaration of Independence to make a point, and the point arrives in the second paragraph. And so the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." And then, of course, if you read the second paragraph of the Declaration of Sentiments, it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident," same language, "that all men and women are created equal." So I want you to notice a couple of things here. First, in the Declaration of Independence, although they used the word men, everyone obviously assumed that it meant men and women, but that really didn't happen. It didn't play itself out like that in reality. What happened was the Declaration of Independence came to be known as a law for men only. Women didn't gain the right to vote, women didn't gain the right to property, but men did. And so in the Declaration of Sentiments, women are asserting themselves into the right to have rights. But what I also want you to notice is that in that second paragraph, women are still placed second. And so I don't know, everybody has their own different belief about the hierarchy and how men and women relate. I personally believe that men and women are of equal stature, and that women can do just anything that men can do. We've just been socialized to be the weaker sex, or the helpmates. But I just think that it's very interesting that rather than to flip-flop those two roles, they decided to go ahead and put men first and women second. It sort of shows you that even with their forward thinking and even with their progressive thinking in 1848, they were still seeing themselves as behind men or secondary to men. And I think that's really interesting because our discussions have all talked about gender equity and reciprocity and being equal to one another and equal partnerships and things like that. So kind of interesting that they decided to put themselves second even in this document. Another kind of thing I wanted you to notice with language is that in the Declaration of Independence, you get these tons of paragraphs, 15, 20 paragraphs that begin with the word he. So he has called together, he has refused, he has forbidden, he has obstructed, he has made judges. And of course in the Declaration of Independence, this he to whom they are referring is the King of Great Britain, because the writers of the Declaration of Independence were declaring their independence against or from Great Britain, from the man, from the patriarchy of Great Britain. In the Seneca Falls Declaration of Sentiments, that same pronoun is used, he, but it's not talking about the King of Great Britain, it's still just talking about the man. And so the man is those men who choose to interpret the law or interpret the Declaration of Independence as a gender hierarchy, as man above and women below. And so it gives several things that men has done. He has never permitted her to exercise her inalienable rights. He has compelled her to submit to laws in the formation in which she had no voice. And so some of these are really interesting. In other words, that second one, he has compelled her to submit to laws in the formation of which she had no voice. It's saying that women have been, in history, throughout all of history, held under the laws, but they had no say in how those laws were constructed. So man created law. Man created all the laws all the way back through history. I mean, think about biblical law, right? Who are all the writers of the Bible. So men created these laws, and then women were just sort of expected to follow them, even though they had no real say in how the laws were constructed or played out or even interpreted up to this point. Another thing that I wanted to point out before I leave the Declaration of Sentiments is one of the he statements, and it says, "He has taken from her all right in property, even to the wages that she earns. And so remember that at this time, and throughout most of history, particularly Western history, women were considered to be property of men. And so back in like the 1800s, for example, there was no concept of rape, basically, unless it was an African American man raping a white woman, and then it was called rape. But there was no real concept of, let's say, spousal rape, where a husband might rape his wife. That really just didn't exist because the wife was considered property of the husband, and as property, he can just do any damn thing he wants to her or with her. And so the idea of woman as property is very interesting because it takes away woman's rights to her own body. And that is what segues with our conversation that we're having today about abortion. A lot of you guys are saying, that you have a very specific belief that you hold dear to yourself, and then you turn around and say, and so that's how I believe that all people should believe. The way I personally believe is how you should personally believe. But what that does is it puts women, for example, if we're talking about abortion, under your law. So you have a law that you live by, and the way that you're interpreting that is very antiquated. It's very old-fashioned because you're saying, the woman doesn't have a right to her own body. I have a right to decide what happens to her body. And so, whether you believe that way or not, you just have to keep in mind that if you believe that way, then you're basically believing in a way that was very popular in 1848, for example, that women are property and that we can dictate to women what they can and can't do to their bodies, even if it means that they'll have children that they don't want, for example, or the children that will remind them of the person who raped them, or children who are going to be mistreated because they don't have a father, or things like that. And so I would just really encourage you to sort of think through the process of dictating your beliefs onto other people, because this is a practice that's been going on for many, many, many years in this country and abroad, and it's a practice that feminism has been trying to overcome for as many years as it's been around. So just keep that in mind and consider it as you're going through your life and through this course. What is it about your very specific belief that should become law? And why is it that all women should live under a law that you yourself believe? What does that say about law, and what does that say about women's rights to have rights? A battle we've been fighting since, well, quite obviously, 1848. And so I liked the way that those two sort of segued, because it showed that the battle that they were having in 1848 and the way that they were demanding their rights in 1848 is the exact same way that we're demanding our rights today. It's absolutely no different. We still have a lot of very fundamentalist and traditional ways of thinking that most feminists are trying to still overcome, and the way that we're trying to overcome that is just to point to them and to expose them in the way that I've just done, to show those of us who are thinking that way that you're thinking that way, to just point to that fact and say, is this the best way to be thinking? Is this a way that really promotes gender equality? And is this the way that really promotes a woman's right to her own body? Or is this a way that promotes laying down the law of man onto woman as property? Right? And so I really appreciated the conversations we're having this week, although some of them seemed a little bit like an attack. And so I would encourage you over the next several weeks as we're finishing this class to really resist attacking a person because of his or her belief, but perhaps just interrogate or question the logic of that belief in the way that I've just done. So rather than saying, so and so, you're wrong for believing that, or that's insane, or that's ludicrous, instead of using those types of ad hominem attacks, and an ad hominem attack is an attack against a person, instead of attacking a person, try really interrogating the belief that they're articulating and showing how that belief it doesn't really make any sense, or that doesn't stand to reason, or goes against reality, or doesn't really add up logically. So I really appreciated the level of participation this week. I think you guys are doing a really great job. I posted the prompt, the assignment description for the final assignment called Gender Transgression. So please get on looking at that, and if you have any questions about it, post on the discussion board that I created for that purpose only. And so I'll start to read the next part of the readings for this part 2 of the week, and hopefully post another video in the next couple of hours or tomorrow. So great job so far. Keep up the good work.